Well, benedicite Dominus, and welcome to question 40 of the Secunda Secundae of St. Thomas Aquinas. The topic for this lecture is war, and I am Dr. Thibault. Now, some people might be watching this because they might be looking for the answer about St. Thomas Aquinas' just war theory. So if you are, welcome. I have a lot of other topics, so feel free to peruse the inventory on all of the questions of the secunda secundae. I think it's important, though, if you are looking at this in terms of looking for St. Thomas Aquinas' just war theory, war is considered a vice. So this is not considered a virtuous thing. It's considered a vice, and it's in opposition to peace. And peace is one of the virtues, one of the parts of charity. So charity is the ideal, right? Love of God, which extends to the love of neighbor, right? The friendship of God, which leads to the friendship of our brothers and sisters, who we treat as if they are another self, like another version of ourselves, right? Kind of an extreme form of treat your neighbor as you would like to be treated, right? So this is charity. Out of charity comes joy, peace, and mercy, right? So these are three internal acts which flow out of charity. War is contrary to peace. So this is not a virtue, it's not a good thing, it's a failure on the part of charity. That's good to know. You might not get that in some of the other videos on just war, who are just focusing on war. Some people say, well, why don't we focus on peace? Well, that is the point, right? The point is that it is about peace. The failure of peace is one of them is war, right? So the first article deals with the question of a just war. Can there be a just war? And this is taken very heavily from St. Augustine. St. Thomas in the 13th century is responding and quoting Augustine here, so it's not in a vacuum. So first, the just war. The war has to be declared by the sovereign. It can't be the citizens or random people declaring themselves an independent state, an independent army. Right? We can get this in the modern day with things like ISIS or Boko Haram or any of these terrorist organizations in the Middle East or in Africa. Who are declaring war, but they don't represent the people. They're not the king, they're not the president, they're not the prime minister. This is a militant organization that pops up for the purpose of war, right? And this is they can never wage a valid war, right? Now this does create some challenges in our modern period, right? So if this were true, then could you have had an American Revolution, right? Right? They weren't a nation, so could they have declared war, right? So it does have its things that can be discussed, right? You know, if you were to say the American Revolution, you'd almost have to declare yourself an independent nation, right? Kind of like the Islamic State does, you know, and then declare war. Next would be, it has to have a just cause. And this, St. Thomas takes a line from St. Augustine. He says, one that avenges wrongs, when a nation has been punished for refusing to make amends for the wrongs inflicted by its subjects, or to restore that which has been seized unjustly, right? So in terms of there has been a wrong in some way. A nation has been wronged, and you are restoring. It's a restorative thing, returning what was owed, right? So some type of thing like 9/11 happened, right? There's an attack on the United States by, not from a government, but by subjects of a different government. Then the proper response would be to call that government where these people are from to make restitutions for what was done, right? And if they don't, then that could lead to war, right? Maybe our problem with that Middle Eastern war, with the overtake of Iraq, was we didn't push enough to get their own countries to respond, right? We responded kind of quickly. That's perhaps a bit of the problem with that one, right? And it's to return that which was taken unjustly, right? So, just cause. And lastly, right intentions, which often has a lot to do with just cause. St. Thomas points out, not for motives of aggrandizement or cruelty, but with the object of securing peace, for punishing evildoers and of uplifting the good. Right. So this is a very important part, and I think this is maybe the most important part of the three, that the purpose of the war, right, the intentions of the war, is to secure peace, punish evildoers, and uplift the good, right? So whenever there is a war, the war is for the sake of ensuring peace. The result of the war is aimed at peace. It is fighting for peace, right? I know that's a controversial topic, but that is the point of the war, right? The war isn't for the sake of the war. It's for the sake of the good, right? And bringing peace. Peace, this could be pointed out too, that peace that we're talking about is not just a lack of conflict, right? Peace is an extension of charity again. It's an extension of love of neighbor and love of God, right? So, again, you could say, well, North Korea is in a state of peace. Kinda, not really, right? They're not in a state of conflict, but it doesn't mean they are in a state of peace, right? So there is a difference between non-conflict and peace. The next article, maybe not that important to people today, but could bishops and priests be warriors? Can they engage in war? And St. Thomas points out that they should not engage in war. Right now we're dealing with the war in the Ukraine, and you see priests putting on military fatigues. I'm not sure if they're shooting guns or not, but according to St. Thomas Aquinas, it wouldn't really be appropriate for the priests and bishops to be shooting the guns, because you should be focusing on the spiritual matter, even if that means dying for the sake of peace, right? Dying for the sake of love of neighbor. But ironically, we're okay with other people who aren't priests dying, but or shooting guns. But the priest and the bishop should not shoot guns. The other part is that they are dedicated to the service at the altar, and if a priest or bishop takes the life of another, this is 13th century law, but if they take the life of another, even if it was by accident, they can no longer serve at the altar. So to shoot, to attack, to kill, would be de facto excluding you from participating in the sacrifice of the Mass. Therefore, you shouldn't do it. It shouldn't happen by accident, and you certainly shouldn't do it on purpose. Right? And for this reason, if we look under justice, St. Thomas also excludes clerics from engaging in economics and commerce as well. So he doesn't want priests engaging in war or engaging in commercial enterprises in terms of selling and trading and being merchant priests. We don't have merchant priests. They should be dedicated to the spiritual and to the sacrifice of the sacraments, right? The sacrifice of the Mass. Now, a priest can help and assist in spiritual matters, right? You see this, that we have military chaplains, right? They minister to the spiritual needs of the troops, and they support in anointing of the sick during combat, but they don't pick up a gun themselves, right? You could think of St. John of Capistrano, who helped lead a crusade against the Turks. But he did it, he might have been leading 70,000 troops, but he was a 70-year-old friar who died 3 months after battle. So I suspect he probably was not waving a sword. Right? Or if he was waving a sword, it wasn't waving a sword at someone, because he probably would have been killed. It was more leading the campaign, right? As a I don't know, a mascot of some kind or something like that, more, or a spiritual guide, but less than as a soldier. Now, could a Christian soldier engage in ambush? Could you ambush? And you think that might be, you only get 4 questions to ask about war. Is that, why that one? And but it's for a good reason. St. Thomas points out, can we, when we're engaged in war, lie or break promises in order to capture our enemy? Can we be lying or breaking promises? And he points out, no. Right? No, we can't lie and we can't break our promises, even in war. Right? This is, in just war theory, this is engaging in war in a just way. Right? You've already declared that it is right to enter into war ad bellum, right? We can enter, we have to then engage in war in an ethical way, and lying and breaking promises is not right. If you go up and say, okay, peace, we're going to go in peace, right? We have a truce, and then as soon as they walk away or put down their weapons, you go and kill them, right? No, breaking promises, you can't break promises. You have to keep your word, right? That's what's ethical. Now you could then, though, set a trap, right? So this is the trick, because if you have to be entirely honest with your the people you're fighting, that can be tough, right? Well, what are you supposed to do? Make a plan and publish it to your neighbor so that you can be honest with them, right? Do you have to tell your enemy exactly what you're doing in order to be honest with them, to be truthful, to be upright, right? You're going to lose the war if you just hand over. If you're just too honest, right? But you can set traps, right? Where I'm from in Rhode Island, they were known during World War II. I think it was World War II, not World War I. But it was a textile area, and they made big cloth things that looked like tanks. They made them in the shape of a tank, so you could set them up outside. If an airplane flew over and they looked down, they'd say, oh, look at them. They got 200 tanks in this location. And they were just cloth. They weren't really tanks, right? So this is, in some sense, lying, right? They're lying about the amount of tanks they have, right? So that would be immoral, right? That they would be lying. But this would be okay for St. Thomas. It's not outright lying, right? If they see the cloth tanks and they think, oh, those are tanks, therefore, they're heavily armed. Well, you didn't tell them that. They took that on their own, right? They presumed that on their own. Another thing, like the way that the mountains are, they can kind of make a bowl, right? And you could lure your enemy into the bowl and then surround them more easily, right? Because you have that kind of natural cliffs and stuff to surround your enemy, and it's easier to fight down than it is to fight up, right? So you could entice your enemy into the natural contour of the hillside and then use it to attack, right? So this is an ambush, right? You might have a small group of people, a small group, and they have a much bigger army, and they think, oh, we'll just go and take out this small group, and really all these people are hiding in the hills or something like that, right? This is a lie in some ways, right? In some ways it's a lie. It's deceiving in some ways, right? It seems deceiving. But St. Thomas says this isn't truly a deception. It's not truly a deception. This is just how you engage in a war. And you didn't tell them that you weren't hiding in the hills. You weren't telling them it was a trap. They should know better, right? In some sense, they should know better. which is tough because here you have, in one sense, you say you cannot lie and you cannot break promises, and on the other side, you can kind of try to trick your enemy, right? Like playing in a game of chess. Like it's one of the best ways of winning would be to distract your opponent into going after somebody, leaving a way to get in and conquer the king, right? Bit of a trick, right? But it's not immoral, it's not unethical, quite as St. Thomas, as long as you're not outright lying, right? Lying would be your friend gets up to go to the bathroom and you move around his pieces, right? That would be lying. This is just part of the rules of the game. Lastly, can you fight on the Sabbath? Can you engage in warfare on the Sabbath? And St. Thomas, although there are many oppositions to this, he says, yes, you can fight on the Sabbath. He uses a line from Maccabees. Whoever shall come up against us to fight on the Sabbath day, we will fight against him. Right? So it's not so much of engaging on war on the Sabbath, on the Lord's day. But if you're attacked, you would respond, right? You don't just stand there and say, well, fighting is work and we can't work on the Sabbath, so I guess they just have to slaughter us. They would say, no, you can fight back on the Sabbath. And presuming this war, because you're engaged in it, you're doing it justly, you are defending people, right? He says, the observance of holy days is not a hindrance to those things which are ordained to man's safety, even that of his body, right? This would be like saying, can the fire department go out and put out a fire on Sunday? Well, yeah, because if not, this person's house is going to burn down. It's going to burn the next house. Before you know it, the whole city is gone, right? Like the Chicago fire, right? The whole city's gone. How much of a loss of life? If you say, well, it's 2:00 on a Sunday afternoon, we can't do anything until 12:01 in the middle of the night on Monday, right? This is not the point, right? If the purpose of this engagement is the protection of human life, even if it's just the protection of the human body, if it's just, it's just, right? And you can do what you need to do even on a holy day with Sabbath. But St. Thomas does point out in the final, in his responses, he says, as soon as the need ceases, it is no longer lawful to fight on the holy day, right? So there's the balance of it, right? So, if you're attacked or you need to respond or that you need to do something for the protection of life, go for it. If it's not needed, don't do it, right? So don't do it on a holy day, right? Kind of like one of those taboo things of, you wouldn't attack somebody on Christmas Day or something like that, right? Call peace for Christmas. Call peace on Easter back then. Call peace on Sunday, right? Presumably, if you were two Christian nations fighting one another, hopefully that never happens. But if it did, neither side would initiate war on Sunday. But even if they did, the other side is allowed to respond for the preservation of life. So, in conclusion, just war is about who has the authority to call war. Is it a just war, right? In terms of the cause, is the cause just? And are the intentions just? Clergy should not be engaging in war. They can offer spiritual support, but they shouldn't be engaged in battle. There are rules within conducting war. Right? You should be truthful and you should keep your promises. However, you can still be a little bit tricky, right? Because you can wage war and you're in the middle of war. You don't have to tell your enemy everything you're about to do before you do it in order to be just. Sometimes you can be a little tricky, but just don't lie, right? Engage in good and honest behavior within war, right? This then gets fleshed out in later years, later generations when we talk about just war. And lastly, fighting on the Sabbath. You may defend life on the Sabbath. You should probably not be instigating war on the Sabbath. You should be resting on the Sabbath. But if you have to pick up arms to preserve human life and it's the Sabbath, then it's like again, like a firefighter or a policeman. Sometimes or a doctor, right? Sometimes some people have to act on the Sabbath in order to save life, and this is no exception. Okay, so that is it for war. Okay, I hope you enjoyed it.